It's been that kind of day. It just has been. There's no other way to say it. A million things moving in a lot of different directions, a lot of things seeming to move on their own willy-nilly. And it's just been, a lot. But here we are. Hi, how are you? Hello, chat. Hello, people watching this and people listening to this and everybody else. It's good to see you. Hi. Yeah, I waved at the screen. What are you going to do? So, for if you're new, and I don't know if you are, hi, I'm John. It's my job to help you write better. And today, we're going to talk about how to describe characters and how to describe stuff, because you can't really only talk about character description. People want to, it's a question people ask, but once you start talking about how to describe characters, you end up talking about how to describe stuff. And if we don't just want like a 5-minute thing where it's describe characters this way and be done, you have to sort of broaden the scope of our question to just describing stuff, which is what I hope to do today. So, ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, non-binary pals, friends, writers, makers, doers, dreamers, worriers, panickers, scribblers, note takers, the exhausted, the burnt out, the people wearing socks, anybody wearing pants, anybody sitting on a couch right now, people stuck in an office, people enduring capitalism, anybody who got outside and got a little bit of sun on their face, anybody who's ever mowed a lawn, people who have considered just how hard it would be to push their car in neutral, anybody who's ever looked at a pair of roller skates, and most importantly, the comrades. Hello. Let's do this thing today. My goal here, if nothing else, is to get you thinking about how you put words on the page and how that makes a difference towards what your goal is. Because let's be clear, you might have a goal with a very transactional nature. It might be, I want to write books and sell them. But in order to do that, in order to accomplish that goal, we've got to stack a few goals in front of it. Like, we have to get you writing and you have to finish a book, things like that. And also, there needs to be, prior to this transactional sort of turn to things, there needs to be an artistic goal, a sense of I'm going to write the best I can, which isn't always a commodity, which isn't always like a verifiable, clickable, one single objective thing, right? You write differently than I write, and the two of us write differently than that person over there. And our best writing, I'm making air quotes, our best writing doesn't necessarily look like anybody else's because it's ours first and foremost. That goal's got to come before the transactional goal, because otherwise we're just racing to make a thing to sell, which is usually the doom of anything you're trying to sell as well as anything you're looking to do in the future. So a topic like today, where we're describing characters, where we are thinking about the language we use and how to construct it, it's not just a matter of, I'm doing this so I can sell a thing. You're doing this so that you can express yourself. You're doing this so that you can take the image in the movie in your brain and put it into some other medium that someone else can consume, and then they get the movie in their brain. It's like a virus transmission kind of a thing, if that makes sense. You're trying to get this across in the, not necessarily the hyper clearest least number of words. We're not on a game show or anything, but you're trying to do this in the most evocative, descriptive, really make the thing feel real sort of way. Turn the imagination, the illusion into something practical. That's where we're aiming. That might be a little bit lofty. That might seem a little abstract. That might seem a little, hippie and woo and kind of far out. But I promise you, no matter who you are, no matter what you're writing, no matter how you're writing, even if this is day one for you, you can do this. If you couldn't, somebody would tell you by now. Now, maybe people have told you before, but I promise you, as a professional in this industry for over 25 years, you have it within you to write well. You really do. It's just a skill like anything else, and we practice it. And one of the things we practice is describing characters. So let's talk about how to describe characters today, shall we? Now, I do want to point out for the people watching this right now, if you have questions at any time, just ask. Any question about anything. There's going to be a lot of information here. It's kind of inescapable. This gets dense. I'm going to try and make it not complicated, but there's going to be a lot here coming at you. And if you need something re-explained and you need something kind of laid out differently, the only thing I can do is help. So let me know, and I'll see if I can put together a few different ideas and a few different ways of saying a thing, and we'll see if we can get on board and figure this stuff out together. There are no stupid questions. You're not bad, dumb, or wrong for having questions. We're just going to figure out how to put tools in your toolbox. That's our plan. Sound good? Sounds good to me. Let's get started. So, we're doing this in sections, and the first thing is to answer the big sort of eternal question of why there needs to be description. Like, why does that matter? Why do we care so much about this when it's sometimes hand-waved away as just, oh, more words? Why does it matter? Here's why it matters. Because without description, those characters who are doing stuff in your story, they're not characters. They're not really anything without description. They're just sort of the least clear thing doing action. Hey, Pete, it's good to see you. We don't want just the character to be like a little stick figure animated in some bad video game style where we're just the minimum number of pixels and frames doing stuff, and then somehow the reader is supposed to go, oh, that's so cool. Because with the minimal amount of art for our imagery, with the minimal amount of created stuff, that reader's not going to really connect with what we're doing. It's going to feel weird, like it's missing significant parts, because it is. And when you poorly describe, which is not necessarily one way or the other, just not as well or as effective. I don't want to use the word good, so let's call it effective. When your description is not effective, your characters don't feel relatable. It's sort of like watching the difference between like sock puppets or shadow puppets versus people, or the actual animal the shadow puppet on the wall represents. It's more relatable when it's like right there in the yard as opposed to the bunny on the wall. We're looking for relatable, humanizing stuff. That's what we want when we read. We don't just want to like see how creative the writer was. We want to see this imaginary world. We want to see this character be a whole person of whatever they are, a robot, a ninja, a wizard, a magic fairy, a demon, prince, whatever they are. We want to see them as though they're real and can picture them. And to do that, we need to have really relatable description. So, if we're going to boil this down, your job is to connect your reader to your character. Any character. I don't just mean your main character, though we're going to spend a lot of time talking about main characters. But understand that all of this stuff is as true for your main character as it is for your sidekick, as it is for the love interest, as it is for the bad guy, as it is for the random person in traffic, 5 pages in, or the person who just says, hey, and then waves at your main character. All characters, everywhere, should be relatable to your reader in some way, shape, or form. And that doesn't mean they all get the same kind of treatment. Some characters are just going to get more than others because they're more important to the story, or they're just doing more stuff, obviously. But everybody's going to be made relatable. Everybody needs to be on some level relatable so that the reader gets a sense that they're not just like a nebulous cog in a machine, but they're a person and part of a world doing stuff. That's important. That's where we're trying to get to. You want to find that human connection in all of these things, whether they're facts about the world or whether they're statements or dialogue. You're looking to build that connection between what's in your head and the reader, who, short of telepathy, you're not in their head, and you need to get there. This is how we do it. All those things people summarize in social media, like why it's important and who gives a shit and stuff like that, this is the response to that. Description, developing an idea. I'm going to use the word description and development somewhat interchangeably because it's more or less the same thing. The finer points are not critical. But I'm going to swap back and forth between them because it is through description and development of ideas and characters and stuff and big stuff and little stuff that your reader feels pulled and drawn into the story, which is what we're aiming for. So that's why this matters. Now, when we talk about the how of it, how do we do this thing? Most of the time we're dealing with a problem of there not being enough description, or there being too much, or no matter the quantity, whatever the description is, it's not really engaging. It doesn't really, I mean, it does the job. It puts detail on an object or on a person, but it does not do that in a way that makes the thing or the person or the whatever feel three-dimensional, I guess would be the best way to say it. It's not engaging. No one cares. It's not moving us. It's not a big deal. It's just, oh, okay, so now they're wearing a hat. It's not just this sort of thought we can brush aside. We are looking for an engagement problem. And the issue with engagement is that most people think they can solve it by just hurling more words around. Like, if I just keep typing sentences, somehow, some way, this is going to be resolved. Kind of like when you're talking to somebody and you're in an argument and you're feeling not heard and you're feeling like they're not getting you, so you just keep saying more, or you say it louder and you start yelling as if that's going to like resolve the argument or deal with the problem. It's like that. You can't throw more words to solve a problem when the words you're using aren't effective. It's not a quantity issue. It's a quality issue. And we can't just break this down as much as the internet would love us to. We can't break this down into say it like this, don't say it like that. Because if we could just make a giant list and I could just read this giant list to you or color code it and put it on a $2 PDF, I'd probably never have to, pay another bill in my life. And we'd be done and we could go home and do whatever now. But it's not a list. We're not trying to prepare a plane for takeoff. We're not trying to double check the recipe for a birthday cake. It's not about do this, don't do. It's not binary like that, because very, very, very few things in this world are. It's a matter of having an idea in your head and finding the ways, because there's more than one. That doesn't mean there's one best. It just means there are multiple ways and you choose one. Finding the ways to get that in the reader's head. Hello, chat. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here. So, we got no lists. Otherwise, we're done. So now, in place of lists, let's get a little technical. There are 3 types of what we would consider regular description. Regular meaning description you could expect to see when you're reading somebody's draft, or when you're looking at a book, or when you've bought a thing and you're skimming through it or whatever. 3 types of regular description. We're going to start first with total description. Total description is, I think, the most common for early writers to some degree. They just start mentioning everything all the time. And it usually happens all at once in one big-ass paragraph. And it ends up sort of like nailing down and carving into stone one particular idea that you're unable to deviate from down the road. So I've written some examples to illustrate this. Some of these examples I made up. Some of these examples I had authors and friends of mine make up just for the sake of it. Others are from actually published books. So you can guess and pick and choose as to what's what, but I think my examples will help. So here is an example of total description. Standing 6'2" and weighing just under 200 pounds, Dash Brigham knew he looked good as he stood naked in his bathroom, watching water drip off his abs, his quads, his biceps. There wasn't a bad inch on him, and certainly there were several inches many ladies really enjoyed with the former Navy SEAL having. He combed his blonde hair back with his fingers. He felt lucky tonight. That's total description. Why is that total description? Because we just painted a whole picture of a guy. And everything came out at once, sort of one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. This, as if, the reader's going to get a quiz on it later and have to remember, like, where did the water drip off on page 1? There isn't a quiz. There's not going to be a quiz. That's not how this works. The real danger here is that the character becomes this sort of idealized, immovable thing. There's no context. There's no reason to learn or bring it up later. We already brought it up on page 1, so you better remember it. And then, if you forget it, well, that's on you. That's not on the author. It's like setting the table all at once and then not replacing any of the food once it gets eaten. Total description has its benefits, though. Sometimes when we're describing not people, if we're describing, a simple thing that only really has 1 or 2 qualities worth talking about, yeah, you can use total description. That's fine. No one's going to get mad if you just describe the coffee pot as old or hot or cold or whatever. It doesn't need to, have this lengthy paragraph associated with it. But there are going to be times where total description gets you into trouble. Because if we're in a scene and if you're writing a thing and if you're trying to relay action and stuff, that's probably not the moment where you want to stop and either bring up for the first time or remind the reader, like, hey, don't forget this person has, a green t-shirt on. Total description is an all or nothing, everything all at once kind of deal. It's not bad, but it's not a super solution to everything. It's a common problem because when writing advice gets taught or when people go searching online for writing advice, you end up in a situation where they see examples of, hey, I'll just dump it all out at once. And that misses the point. So on we go. What does type 2 look like? Type 2 is random. Now, random is exactly what it sounds like. It just comes out of nowhere. Our example would be this. He brought a knife to a wizard fight. The first spells were coming down in wide arcs overhead, electric green mortars slowly homing in on him. The idol was still on the dais, and the audience had long since ran when the first threats came. Now here he was, all 5 foot in change of him, with tired blue eyes, holding a butter knife, while 2 wizards battled to see who would kill him. Hell of a day. The random description in there are the tired blue eyes. Because if we pretend like that sentence, that a part of the sentence isn't there, it makes more sense. There's no reason in this moment when we're describing the scene in the picture and where he's standing and how what's going on. Why on earth would you bring up his eyes? Random description is where description appears without motivation. There's no clear reason for it. Purpose, it's not doing anything. Or explanation, here's why I'm saying what I'm saying. It's an interruption. It can be an interruption. Because if we're going along and having a scene and stuff's happening and people are talking and people are doing stuff, then all of a sudden we throw the reader this strange statement about, and then she blinked her green eyes. Okay. It's jarring. We want to make sure that when we bring up description of whatever, that we're not doing it in such a way that we are radically affecting the progression of ideas and the development of ideas the reader has going on in their head. Let's do another example that's not fiction. So let's say you and I were driving somewhere. We're going to run an errand somewhere. And we're talking about what we're going to do that day. We're talking about what we're, looking to do this weekend or whatever. And then all of a sudden, randomly, I turn to you and go, hey, don't forget, bananas are radioactive. And then we just resume our conversation as if I hadn't just told you a thing. That would be weird. That would stick out to you. You might turn to me and go, hey, John, why did you bring up bananas? Oh, I just did. I don't know. We want to get away from the I don't know, shrug kind of answer for description. We want to move away from just describe everything and let the reader deal with the pieces. And we want to get away from random description that's just described because I got to put it somewhere, so let's put it here. We want to move to a third kind, which is called contextual description. Now, this isn't automatically the best. It's not like a hierarchy where this is the best and the other two things suck. This is more a matter of this is frequently a good tool to use in many situations. But there are times and places to throw in a random detail because you want to keep the reader focused. Or there are times where you want to be in total description because you just want to lay a thing out and not have to worry about it. But contextual description is description that comes up with a reason, because we're trying to point out that something going on the page right at that moment is the reason why I'm describing this other thing also on the page. Here's our example. A tank leak Chris ran his fingers through his hair. Over the past decade, or about the same time frame during which he traded the suits and ties he wore, that's a typo, he wore as corporate CFO for the jeans and Oxford shirt he wore as a winery owner. The silver strands had begun to outnumber the cocoa-colored waves with which I'd fallen in love. It's part of a romance novel. It's a good romance novel. But contextual description, this idea of what he's wearing, what color his hair is or was, comes up because it's setting a scene relative to what's happening in the moment. Contextual description, any context really, gives us a chance to feel like the description has a function and a purpose. It's here for a reason that is not just the reason the author needs to put it somewhere. There's a value to it. It's useful. When contextual description is smooth, when it's seamless, it feels like it naturally makes sense to have it there on the page. It's not an ideal solution that we can't do it for everything, because sometimes there's no context created, like the opening page of a story. The reader doesn't have any idea what we're going to talk about, so you can't just assume there's a context. Likewise, in the middle of a big emotional scene or an action beat or something, you want some of those random little details to make things feel more intense, scary. You know, if we're in a scene where a character is being chased by the monster in the haunted house, those small details like the sound of the monster's nails dragging on the floor comes out of nowhere, but we do it because it feels more scary that way, which is what we're going for. There are three different types of description that we talk about because there are three different tools in the toolbox. We can do this in any number of ways. These are our tools. Use them as you need to. Use them as you want to. Mix them up. Use them back to back. Use a little bit of this and a little bit of that. There's no one right way here. It's not like me coming in and wagging my finger and saying, do this or else. Many tools, lots of different ways to solve lots of different problems, lots of different ways to put different things on the page. Don't get bogged down in thinking that there's one right way and 10 million wrong ways, and you're very good at finding the wrong ones and not so hot at finding the good one. There is no right and wrong here. There's just opportunity. On we go, though. Which takes us to really sort of the big problem, which is dull and tedious description. If there's a thing, if there is any kind of substantial, what's the word I want to use? Any kind of common thread that befalls writers all over the place is that they describe stuff, and that's fine, but it's boring. It's clear in the sense that it conveys information, but it only conveys information. It's the text equivalent of watching paint dry. It's not engaging. It doesn't move us. It doesn't affect us. And description should in some way. Now, granted, it's not going to be the same as, one character turning to the other and saying, I love you, because that's a big emotional kind of moment. And learning that they drive a particular kind of car or that they're this tall doesn't hit the same way, but it should hit in some way. It should do something. So, first thing to point out, you don't always know when you've got dull writing. A lot of people go one of two ways. They assume it's all dull and they suck, or that everything is fine and they're doing great because it makes sense to them. So it is worth pointing out that dull is subjective. But that doesn't mean you need to sit on those negative assumptions and go, yeah, well, I just suck at description and whatever, I'll deal with it later, or never at all, or it's a problem, or whatever negative thing you've told yourself a million times. The point is that no matter what, we want to focus on two things. One, what does the reader want and need in this scene? They're reading this, they're trying to picture this movie in their head. What do they need right now to keep that happening? And two, in the course of doing that, are we moving the camera? The idea of every sentence acting in such a way as to contribute to the movie the reader's watching in their imagination. Every sentence is adding new material or selecting new material from the huge pantheon of things you could choose. Is the camera moving? Is our story underway? Dull description's primary problem is not that it's description and it's, like the wrong word. It's description that does not feel significant because it's not contributing anything to the spot in the text where it's at. It's okay that you've made the character this tall or that they have that kind of clothes on or that they do this or that they identify as that. That's fine. It's why you've chosen to tell the reader that thing at that moment. That's the question. And you should have an answer to that. It matters. So my challenge to you from this point forward is to think about, okay, so I've got this detail about them. They look like this, they do this, whatever. Why am I going to tell them this thing right now? And the answer needs to be something more than, I just wanna. Because there's value in that answer, for sure. But we need to do more than just like cater to our own selfish whim. There needs to be a story, a narrative value here. It has to help in some way. Keep that in mind as we go forward, because that's going to come up a lot. On we go. So here's what happens with dull description. Here's an example. He was a tall, spare man, and he was staring at me with smoke gray eyes that matched his tie. His hair was short. He, unlike Kevin, did not look like he slept in his clothes while getting dragged behind a city bus. That's fine. It's okay. One of the problems people get into when they start working with description is that they overthink and underthink at the same time. If you look at those sentences, there is nothing technically wrong. The grammar is fine. The commas are okay. They're not perfect, but they're not terrible. You're not going to flunk an English test with stuff like that. It's just there. It just sits on the page. It doesn't help you connect to anything. It's not like, oh, instead of the tie, we should have had it match his shoes. Nothing like that. It's not technically wrong, but as a reader, did this really do anything for you? That question has to sit in the driver's seat sometimes when it comes to description. It's okay. He's tall and spare and he's staring. Cool. Are there other ways we could have said it? Absolutely. There's a million different ways. It's a matter of choice. What are you choosing to provide the reader, and why are you choosing this moment to provide it in the way that you're choosing it? Because I could have had another 2 sentences talking about Kevin looking like garbage when he sleeps in his clothes or gets dragged behind a bus. I could have contrasted this guy, this tall, spare guy, and Kevin for 5 more sentences, 5 pages if I wanted to. Why did I choose the thing I chose? Why is it in the spot on the page that it is? What's it doing here? How does it help put the movie in the reader's head? On we go. Let's look at a different example, though. The school day's first bell rang while Ryan was still sorting through his backpack. He was pretty sure he put the book and paper in his bag last night. Yeah, there it was, right next to the severed fingers that were slowly crawling over his math homework. He blinked his blue eyes. That blue eyes part, why is that there? What's that doing? How does that help us? Because we just had a paragraph that ended with, hey, there are fingers crawling out of a backpack. Why on earth would we jump to his blue eyes? Now, I know in your head, you're watching this in your imagination and you think there should be a camera shot of his face showing his reaction. Because if we were watching this on Amazon or Netflix or whatever, that's what we'd probably see. So you want to go to that. That's another paragraph. So that makes it a new sentence. So that makes it a new camera move. I get it. I see the logic. But hang on a minute. What are we doing? If we want to talk about his reaction, why do we need to dial in so specifically on his eyes? Character details have a purpose, and you have to know what that purpose is. What they do, no matter what they are, whether they're eye color, hair color, hand size, strength, number of abs, posture, movement, job title, internal monologue, whatever. There's a reason relative to what's happening that you're bringing them up. It's not like we have a bingo card we're trying to stamp because you've mentioned eye color 5 times. Stamp. There's no prize for that. That's not how this works. Yes, you do want to move the camera. Yes, you do want to create an image, a moving image, audio-visual experience in the reader's mind. Absolutely. But these finer details, why can't he just blink his eyes? Why isn't the sentence just he blinked? It could be. Again, we're not doing this in a right, wrong, passing grade, failing grade kind of thing. It's a matter of understanding, okay, I, the writer, am telling you this detail in this moment for a reason. Now, maybe I'll explore that reason in more depth in the next paragraph. That's a possibility. But maybe sometimes you just pick the wrong spot to mention a thing in. It's worth knowing he has blue eyes, for sure. But in this paragraph where we're trying to have a moment of horror because, hey, creepy fingers, maybe that's not the best moment to bring up blue eyes. What about what, Pete? You've asked a question. I assume Pete is writing me an example. Hair so red it could light up the midnight sky. Great. The irises of her eyes, a stark white, enhanced her... You don't need the witch. Enhanced her flawless features. That's fine. Like, it's okay. It's not wrong. One of the things I want to get this across, because this is important. It's not the sentence by itself, right? It's not that you've said her hair is this and her eyes are that. That's not bad. That's not the point here. It's understanding that if you go talk about her hair and then you talk about her eyes and then you bring up this idea of flawless features, the next thing you say, the next sentence, the next paragraph, whatever it is, has only a few different ways it could go. It's you've sort of changed what's called the utility of your description. Because if you're going to go from hair and eyes and features to something totally else, like hair, eyes, and then here comes a car driving down the highway, it feels really jarring. We want to get away from really jarring moments. So we want to make sure that as we're writing, as we're thinking through our thoughts, we move with a level of utility. You brought up hair, you brought up eyes, you brought up features. It probably makes sense to continue talking about features or talk about outfits or talk about movements, talk about the body, and then keep moving forward. Because there's a greater utility in going from features to the body than it is from features to, I don't know, it's a Thursday, Context of description matters supremely. It's always about what you've got going on in the total of everything, as opposed to just, how's this specific detail? It's a fine specific detail. It doesn't matter if her hair is red. It doesn't matter if her hair is orange. It doesn't matter if she's got 11 fingers or, one nose or whatever. What is it doing here on the page right now? Because you could put it anywhere. Why here? Why now? That's the question. But let's swing the pendulum the other way. What happens when you overdo it? What happens when there's just way too much description? Because that happens a lot. So first of all, to diffuse or forestall the argument I know that's coming, you can absolutely have too much description. Absolutely. There's a balance between too much and just right that comes back to that idea of utility we just talked about with Pete, where what you're bringing up has a purpose, a value. It's a segue. It's a link in a chain. I'm going to talk about her hair and her eyes and her body and her movements so that I can talk about how she's acting the way she's acting. 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 links in a chain. Could I have put different links? Sure. Could I have started it differently? Yeah. Does that matter? No. Doesn't really matter at all. It's the point of this is to get you to ask yourself, what is this detail? Fill in the blank, whatever detail it is. What is this detail doing here right now? Why did you tell the reader that? Not overall, because it's important to know what her hair looks like. It's important to know what her eyes look like, because at some point the reader's going to wonder what she looks like overall. But why do that on page 5? Why do that on page 5, third line? Why not do that on page 4 or page 11? Always ask yourself, here's this detail. Why is it here? What's it doing? This is also true for repeated detail. Let's say it's a dark and stormy night. Doesn't matter what it is, but let's just say it's a dark and stormy night, and you've got people, I don't know, they're walking in the city on a dark and stormy night, trying to get from point A to point B. How often do you have to tell the reader about how much it rains or how wet everything is? How often do you have to bring up dark and stormy? Probably not as much as you think. Probably more than once, but not like every other sentence. Because telling somebody a repeated detail does not make that detail more active or engaging. If I tell you, for instance, I'm hungry every other sentence, you're going to get annoyed. So why do we think that rule wouldn't also equally exist for you telling the reader how tall someone is? They're very tall in their tallness. Or how dark and stormy the night is. Or how eerie the eerie, scary place is. Be careful in belaboring your point. It's not helping the mood. It's not building better atmosphere. You don't always need 25 different things, because after a while, you're just sort of clubbing the reader in the head with these details that have already been expressed. You already told them it's dark and stormy. You've already made it rain. You've already gotten people wet. Why are you still telling them something? Why is this detail in the spot that it's in? On we go. So here's a detail. Here's some stuff. You ready? It's a long paragraph. She walked to the mirror. Everything looked terrible under the yellow motel light, but she ran a hand through her blonde hair that needed washing and looked herself over. She was fit thanks to all that exercising, and she was still, in her mind, the cute 20-something that turned heads, even though that was a lifetime and 6 years ago. Her fingers ached. Her 3 tattoos, the snake, the 4 of clubs, the raccoon, looked a little worse for wear. And was that a bruise on her thigh there yesterday? That's a lot of detail. Why is it here? What's the reader supposed to do with all that? Is there a quiz? Will somebody, will there be a multiple choice question later asking me, is it the 4 of clubs or the 5 of clubs? So now we get from chat an example. Auburn hair that reminded him of his gap year in Argentina. That's a brilliant sentence. Her blue eyes, the same twinkle as mineral water he loves so much as it filtered through hand-blown glass. Freckled alabaster skin. I like the first sentence. The second sentence is not bad. It's growing on me. It needs a verb or something. But yeah, it's descriptive. It's evocative. You've got the feeling of it down. I like that. But the next question is going to be, what do you do with it? You can paint me a very static, visual, pretty picture. Picture these things not moving. Picture these things that evoke mood. That's fine. That's great. That's like half the game right here. But now we got to make this movie move. This movie is moving. It's a moving picture in the reader's mind. So you've got to think about, okay, so I'm talking about this. I'm talking about the way he feels. I'm talking about her. Where do I go from here? What's going to be that next step? In either case, either in the one in chat or the one I read, the detail itself isn't bad. It's great. It's useful. But it only affects the stuff that's around it, like a moon orbiting a planet. We have the moon, it's orbiting Earth. Neptune and Pluto don't give a shit about our moon. You got to think about the value, the value of the space and the value of the descriptive material all over. And yes, if you go to an explosion in a chase scene, yeah, obviously that's why we need to know about her freckled alabaster skin. Obviously, John, what was I thinking? But yes, that's what I'm talking about. You got to figure out, okay, so this detail's great. What am I going to do with it? Always think about how this thing you're writing, whatever it is, I don't care if it's a dialogue scene, I don't care if it's a sex scene, I don't care if it's a scene, if it's a paragraph describing the history of the castle, whatever it is, how does this paragraph lead us to the next thing you want me to know? How do we go from 1 to 2? Whatever it is. That's the big takeaway here for description. Because most people don't have a problem making the description in a vacuum. Here's this person, they look like this. Here's this table, it looks like that. People can describe stuff. They see it in their head to some degree in some way. But making that description purposeful so that it has use in the story as a whole, that's the hard part. That's the part we practice. On we go. Back to our big example. If we pull out the overdone description parts, she was fit thanks to all that exercising, and her 3 tattoos, the snake, the 4 clubs, and the raccoon, like, do we need those in the scene? There's a difference between needing them in the scene because, oh my God, they're really important for you to picture, versus the reader knowing them. Again, this goes back to that idea of there being a quiz. Lots of writers want the reader to be super informed on lots of levels all at once. Look, they know all this stuff, because really what they're looking for in those instances is validation. Didn't I do a good job making all these details? Didn't I think stuff up good? And the answer is yes, you totally did. You're a very good thinker-upper of things. Good job. But the reader isn't here to tell you that you're smart. The reader isn't here to tell you that, you did a very good job, you're very imaginative, go have a juice box. The reader is here because they want a story from you. They want to see a movie in their imagination. So if we're going to give them details like she was fit thanks to all that exercising, there better be a utility to it relative to what's going on. If we're going to specify her tattoos, the snake, the 4 of clubs, and a raccoon, then there better be a point to it. Those tattoos better come up again. Not 60 pages from now, although it would help then too. But maybe within 2 pages, within 5 pages, next paragraph, something. Because otherwise, it's going to be forgotten by the reader. That's not because they're stupid. It's just because your story has a lot of stuff in it. And it would be unrealistic of you, silly even, to think that, oh yeah, they're going to totally remember what I wrote on page 2. Everybody hangs on every single one of my words. They can't. There's only so much room in their brain for all the attention paying you're having them do. So, a lesson here, you got to be willing to hold on to some details. And some stuff you're going to write down and it's never going to make the page. Some stuff you write in draft 1 and it gets cut and we all move on with our lives. That's fine. Hold some details until later because it'll help you. And if stuff never comes up, well, then it never comes up. If you never get around to describing like the particular length of a character's fingernails, then I guess that's never coming up. I guess it doesn't matter. You can have it in your head, but if it doesn't make it to the page, it's fine. You're still a good person. You still wrote a good thing. Not everything needs to translate to, oh my God, on the page, and oh my God, it's 1,000,000,000% critical. When you're going back through and revising, when you're going back through and taking a look at what you've written, ask, here's this sentence, here's this detail, here's this fact, here's this whatever. Is the scene that it's in made better by this being here? Is this thing doing a job here? If it is, great, leave it alone. If it's partially contributing because it works together with 5 other things, great, leave it alone. If it's just sitting there because you didn't know where else to put it, or it's sitting there because it feels weird, but you had to mention it for some, compulsory reason, that's the stuff you cut. On we go. Let's swing the pendulum the other way. Lots of people overdo, right? They pack the whole thing up, all the facts, all the details, all the statements, because they want the reader to know, because they want the reader to get it. The other side of the coin is that you make an assumption that the reader is going to understand what you mean by default, that they know what you mean when you say the bedroom or the dining room or work. That's not because, the reader's dumb that they don't get it. It's because they just don't know what to picture. So this is underdone description. This is too little description. 9 times out of 10, 90% of the time, the reason why there's not enough description on the page is the author's made either an assumption that the reader already understands, or that the reader would be bored, or that the reader doesn't care, or an expectation that the reader will just figure it out, that the reader is so used to seeing this stuff that it doesn't matter, or that they'll just pick it up from context clues somehow magically through the cosmos. You can't operate from there. It's not a useful long-term strategy. What the reader sees and understands is based on what's on the page. And you can't necessarily skimp on that and then expect them to get a nuanced picture. Just because it's clear to you, you know what you meant when you said the bedroom, does not mean the reader, who has no idea of anything other than you just said it's a bedroom, the reader doesn't know the specifics. That doesn't mean we have to give them every inch of everything. It just means you got to give them something. What's the best picture here for the moment right now? Here's this sentence. Here's the action scene. The car is speeding down the highway. What's the coolest thing? What's the best thing I could write to keep the reader engaged? It's probably about the car or the speed or the traffic or the road or the driving or the person behind the wheel. It is probably not, the number of birds in the sky or the traffic report on the radio, though that might be important plot-wise. You want to give the reader, or strive to give the reader, the best picture possible whenever possible. And best, I'm making air quotes, does not always mean 1,000 million % detailed down to the subatomic level. It's not a total picture. It's the best picture. And you can always make another sentence and add more stuff to it. Why is this fact here? What's it doing here? What's the best image for this moment on this page as the reader reads it? Slowly, little by little, we are adding tools to the toolbox. So let's look at something. The bedroom was quiet. She sat on the bed, cleaning her magic wand and her gun. What she wanted more than anything was to have something to do. Killing Todd would have to be enough. Okay. It's a little bare. It's a lot bare. How is this paragraph supposed to connect to a reader? What are they supposed to see in their head? You've given them a little bit of detail. You've done something. There's a bedroom. There's a bed. There's a person sitting on it. There's a wand. There's a gun. A person is cleaning them. The person has a want and has to settle for something. But there's a lot of big picture details missing. What her face looks like. Is it light or dark in the room? Is there any furniture in the room? Where's Todd? What carpet is there? How should this moment feel? What's the mood here? What's the atmosphere? You've got to consider, anytime you describe something, whether it's, the knife and fork on the table or the character's mood or the rain coming out of the clouds, you've got to think about what the reader's going to do with that information. They've got to put together a movie in their imagination, right? They've got to sit there and go, okay, it's raining. So now they picture rain. Okay, now they're outside, so picture outside. They're trying to piece together, using the context clues you're giving them, this movie that you want them to have. When you write a thing and you know what you mean, you have to remember that the reader doesn't know what you mean yet. That's why they're reading. Don't rest on the assumption. That doesn't also mean you can't, or how do I say this? You also don't rest on the idea that over detail will sort that out. There is a huge sweet spot between I've said too much and I've said too little. And your sweet spot for that is going to look different than my sweet spot for that. And if you really want to blow your mind, your sweet spot for description and development is going to look different from draft to draft and book to book, because of a number of different things. Your voice, the time, how much experience you have, how comfortable you are, how big the sentence is, how short the sentence is, what kind of style you're writing with, your point of view, your tense, your word choice. Loads of different factors go into it. It's not a one-size-fits-all, get it once and never replace it kind of thing. It's always situational. It's always of the moment. On we go. My big urgency here is to get you to be thoughtful. The bedroom was quiet. She sat on the bed, cleaning her magic wand and gun. What she wanted more than anything was to have something to do. Those details matter because you're bringing them up. If they didn't matter, why are they on the page? Pick and choose the details. And that means you got to make them up. That means you got to make them up. But pick and choose the details that will allow the reader to connect not only in the present moment, but with the big picture you're trying to express. We want to do more than just inform our readers. We're not just in the knowledge supply business here. Here, have a unit of fact. Here is a box of knowledge from the warehouse. We want to be thoughtful. We want to develop an idea so that the reader says, okay, I know how that moment feels. I've never tried to clean a wand in a gun and I don't have to kill a Todd, but I know what it feels to want to have to do something. I've been sitting on the couch, bored out of my skull today. I know that mood. That's the spot we're ultimately trying to get our reader to. Make sense? On we go. Hang on. There we go. So let's package this stuff up. Let's see if we can recap this and we'll answer some questions. You're going to describe anything and anyone with purpose. If for some reason you've decided, hey, I want to purposefully, I'm choosing to hold back. I don't want to describe what my main character looks like. That's fine. But that is going to put a requirement or create a necessity for you to describe other stuff instead, because otherwise your book's going to be real short if we're not describing anything. You want to describe with a purpose. And those details you offer, whatever they are, about whatever thing, should have a value to the present paragraph, sentence, chapter, scene. Present contextual value matters. Now let's split some hairs just to make a point. You don't always have to have your characters look in mirrors. You know that, right? Like they don't have to find some reflective surface in order for you to say, oh, this is what they look at, because they're looking at themselves. Like I know there are many like science experiments that say like put a mirror in front of a chimp or in front of a dog. That kind of understanding of description is about as useful as those basic science experiments. You don't always need to manufacture a reason for the character to relay the information. You can just mention it. Right now, here's an example. I'm sitting here talking into this microphone. I am aware of the color socks I'm wearing. It does not matter in this moment, but I don't need to like stop and look in a mirror or stop and like find a metaphor for my color socks. Like I don't have to look at my, think, my colors are the socks of, my socks are the color of an oncoming storm. I could just say I'm wearing gray socks. It doesn't matter. You don't have to manufacture a reason to force a moment where your character is there. So Pete's got a question. If you're describing the bedroom of your main character, he's a metalhead and he's into horror movies. How much detail do you go into in the look of his room? I don't know, Pete. How much detail do you want to go into? There's no magic number. It doesn't matter if the music and horror aspect play into the story later. That's fine if it does, and it's fine if it doesn't. There's no requirement. This is not about you have to have 7 sentences or 12 adjectives. There's no numbers like that. You have an entire book. Sure, would you describe the posters on the wall? Sure. Why not? You can describe anything. Talk about the way the room smells, the way the room feels, the number of posters, which posters there are. You could describe anything you want. It doesn't matter. I feel I've done you a disservice here because in talking about what's important, I feel like I worry I've given you this idea that it has to like matter to the plot. And that's not what I'm talking about. It can be plot related, but it's not only that. It matters more to the whole picture, the whole movie, the whole story, not in a critical, oh my God, if you don't know this detail, the whole thing falls apart way, but just a considerate brushstroke on the painting. It's one among many. It's one note of music in the song. It doesn't ruin the song by being there or not being there, but we need it because it's part of the whole. It's not the same as like omit the chorus. Paint a clear picture that tells the reader what you want them to see in their head. Yes. We want to paint a picture in the reader's head to tell them what, see this. Read this sentence, interpret it in your brain, picture it in your head. Every sentence. And ideally, each sentence connects to the sentence before it, and it adds up. First sentence leads to second sentence. First and second sentence added together go to third sentence. It's okay to have lots of questions. It's okay to be very new. I love new. I love questions. I just want to make sure you are thinking about this in more than just a plot. Here is the plot. Everything I say has to be about plot, or everything I say has to be about, the journey the character is going to go on kind of way. Sometimes we're just describing a bed. Sometimes we're just describing a sandwich. And we want that sandwich in the moment to feel like, oh, I can see that sandwich. I get it. I know I can imagine that in my hands. I can imagine that in my mouth. I can taste it. But it's just a sandwich. And in 2 chapters, lunch is over and it doesn't matter. You want to make sure, not just you, Pete, I mean anybody, but you want to make sure that when you are creating a thing for the reader, whatever it is, that while they're engaged, while they're imagining this thing, it's as vibrant and three-dimensional, as practical, as realistic as it could be. One of the things I haven't really mentioned, and maybe now this is a good time for it, but one of the things to mention is that, when you're watching TV, a show, anything, a movie, and the CG looks terrible, even if it's an old movie, doesn't matter. But the special effects, the graphics of it just look like real bad. Everything's kind of wet or blurry, or there's weird lighting around it, so it very clearly looks like it's been superimposed on the frame. You know what I mean? Like bad special effects, that kind of stuff. Clearly, yes, it's somebody's job. They did their job, good for them. But it's just not polished enough. We don't want to aim for that. We don't want that to be our get to that level. Don't make bad CG. Bad CG happens, but we don't plan to make bad CG. We aim for really good CG. We aim for really good descriptions that feel as though the made-up digitized stuff is just as real as the real practical stuff. And that the reader should not be able to tell the difference. That's a badly packaged movie metaphor to lay out the idea of how you describe what you describe and the degree, the quantity, but also the quality of how you describe something. You don't need to describe everything all up front. You don't need to pack all your character details onto page 1, chapter 1, and then barely bring it up ever again. There's a time and place for everything. What your reader wants is a movie in their head. They want to see the thing from beginning to end. They want to feel as though they're running, driving, jumping, shooting, fleeing, screaming, whatevering right alongside the main characters. They want to feel like they've got to fight the bad guy too. They want to feel like it's, happening to them just as much as it's happening to the characters. And they want to care as much about the characters doing well as they would care about, their pet in the next room or their family member down the hall or their significant other or whatever. They want to care and they want to imagine. Your job is to give them the tools that allow them to do that because they are voluntarily coming to you to do that. That's what they want. They want to go to the movies. They want to go to the movie with your book. And every sentence films or adds film to this movie. Sometimes it's going to be a sentence about the couch and the salad bar at the restaurant. And other times it's going to be a sentence that explores the depth of human emotion as the character realizes, oh God, the printer is out of paper. My life is over. Your job is to put a movie in the reader's brain. And we do that thoughtfully and carefully. We don't half-ass it, nor do we go 10,000 miles over the line just to demonstrate how smart we are. Look at all the adjectives I know for blue. Nope, don't need to do that either. You just need to lay these things out one step at a time. Give the readers the details that make a difference at the time you give it to them. There's no checklist. They're not like, I don't like, I saw this on social media today. There was somebody complaining that by the end of a book, whatever book it is, they expect to have certain things described to them. They want to know how tall the character is, what they do, what they look like, what color their eyes are, what color their hair is, like how they dress, whatever. They had all these requirements. And anytime you didn't meet those requirements with your book, they would deduct something from whatever rating they were going to give you on whatever website they use to rate books. That's a really shitty thing to do. Like that's just bad behavior. We should not accept that from people, because you can tell a story in a million different ways. You can describe a character or not describe a character. You can describe part of a character and not other parts. Like we can talk about how tall somebody is, but not how many, like, you know, does it matter if they have like a birthmark on their elbow or something? Not really. There's no checklist. Don't treat this like a checklist. It's not helping. You don't have a requirement. You get to describe what you want, but describe whatever you choose in a way that the reader can picture it. And when you skimp on stuff, when you just go, it's the bedroom of a horror fan. Okay, you are trusting the reader with a lot of details there to fill in on their own. And if you're cool with that, you're cool with that. That's fine. But when they suddenly start inserting stuff that you don't want because you didn't give them any kind of guidelines or structure, that's your fault. Let's come up with a nonfiction example to illustrate this. I don't know if you've ever had to like watch a child or like give instructions to a kid, babysit or something. It's the difference between saying, okay, stay in this room, do whatever you want, versus here are some toys you can play with. They want readers to jingle keys in their face. No, buddy. No, they don't. It's the difference between saying do whatever you want in this room versus here are the toys you can play with. Focusing them specifically on something that they can engage with versus letting them run amok and lick and stick their fingers in every outlet. One is reckless, but still technically under the mandate of please watch my kid, whereas the other is purposeful and good engagement with a human. We want to make sure we lay out the boundaries and the space and the options and the opportunities and the actions so that our reader can engage with stuff. Because if I just go, there's a person in a room and then stop talking, you are lost. Are they standing? Are they sitting? Are they floating? Are they spinning? Are they dancing? You meant the Twitter person. Yeah. Yes. The Twitter person did, I think, in fact, want like everything like spoon fed to them. Like a cat, but not even with a cat with a laser pointer. Just, I have certain requirements, make me happy, dance to my tune, monkeys. And that's a shitty thing, man. That's just wrong. So instead, let's do better. Let us be purposeful. Let us make decisions. Now, it's about this time that somebody points out, hey, John, doesn't that slow us down? Kinda. At least initially it does. If you're getting started as a writer, you might worry that it's taking too long. But if you're being careful and considerate and you're laying the story out, it's not that much longer. Sure, it might take you a few more seconds to write a few more sentences, but in the grand scheme of things, no one's going to remember the exact number of seconds it took you to write a paragraph on a Tuesday. So it's a little slower, but not so slow that, oh my God, you've paralyzed and ruined the entire act of fiction. Take your time. Focus on what's in your head. Get it clear in your head. Not so that it's Spartan and bare with no detail, but that it's clarified. That you can close your eyes and move through the scenes and see the people and touch the car and feel the wind on your face and feel the rain and hear the birds and all those things. You can imagine them in your head as though you, the person, are standing there, because that's the same thing the reader is doing. And then all you have to do, and I'm going to simplify this for the sake of a sentence, but all you have to do is translate that to somebody else. Here's what I see. Here's what I feel. Here's what I want you to see. Here's what I want you to feel. Your job is to describe with purpose, and every sentence is a new opportunity to do that. So, are there any questions? About anything? We do need to figure out what we're talking about next week, though. We can go back to Q&A. I got no problem going back to Q&A, but I got to tell you, I have really been enjoying kind of stepping away from Q&A and getting into other topics. So maybe next week, let me look at my list. You want to talk about how to just like lay out a scene? Shall we just build a scene next week? Here's what goes into one. Here's what doesn't. Here's what fits. Here's what doesn't. We'll talk about utility. We'll talk about some stuff. We'll do some scene work. How's that sound for next week? I'm a little biased in this. I've been trying to do this as a blog post for a while, for a newsletter, and it's just not coming together. So let's try it as a stream next week. But if there are no other questions, let's get out of here. Yes. I'm glad. Why is this not clicking? Oh, I'm pressing the wrong button. I want to thank everybody for being here. Pete, I appreciate you being here. I'm always happy to teach you whatever it is you want anytime you want. I love teaching this stuff. I really do. I get better at it every time. It makes me excited. It makes me happy. I love this stuff. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks for checking this out. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions. Thanks for your suggestions. Thanks for your time. I know there's a ton of writing advice out there. Some of it not so great. Some of it just drowns you in stuff. I try to find an actionable middle ground. So let me remind you of a few things. If you liked this and you want to see more of it, the best thing you can do for $2 a month, yeah, just $2 a month, patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouWriteBetter, where I do this plus a ton of other stuff. Tomorrow, in fact, I'm going to watch Dune 2 and take it apart and talk about what works and what doesn't and how the scenes work and how the character arcs go and what this says and what that says. So $2 a month, patreon.com/JohnHelpsYouWriteBetter. Everything I've ever recorded, everything, is available on this YouTube channel. Go back through all the, stuff. There's stuff on plot and characters and genre and publishing and pitching and marketing and query letters. There's a ton of stuff, hundreds of hours. Check it out there. And if after all that, you're sitting here and listening to me and you're thinking to yourself, man, I need more help. I don't need videos. I don't want the podcast. I want help. Here you go. Here's the help. Head over to johnhelpsyouwritebetter.com. Let's talk. Let's just talk. I'd be more than happy to sit down with you for half an hour or so or longer and go through line by line, word by word, idea by idea, whatever you need. I would love to help you write better. And if you want me in your ears every day for somewhere between 7 and 11 minutes, apparently, according to my metrics, wherever you get your podcasts, go look for John Helps You Write Better. Tomorrow, there's a really good one coming. So until then, if there's nothing else, I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of the people around you. You matter. You have skills. You are good enough to do this. And I most definitely believe in you. All power to all people. I will talk to you guys soon. See ya.